$200 was all I spent on this Apple Silicon MacBook Air, but the cheap price comes with a major issue. The screen is damaged, specifically in the bottom left corner, a very common failure point, caused by the charging cable springing back after being unplugged and getting caught between the display and top case. While smartphones are protected by strengthened glass, this screen is as fragile as an eggshell. This particular MacBook is a base model M1 Air with 8 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage, and a battery with 464 cycles. The cost of a screen replacement can often outweigh the value of the laptop, so it's important not to overspend on the device. I was initially going to repurpose this laptop into something else, however I found a cheap replacement display on AliExpress. Selecting the correct model, I didn't hesitate to purchase it. But I overlooked the details of the listing. eBay, Amazon, and AliExpress offer the option of multiple item options per listing. Mislabeled under color was the option between a full display, which is what I thought I had ordered, and an LCD cell. So I was caught a little off guard when I opened the package. Measuring in at just 0.8 of a millimeter thick, with several delicate flex cables dangling from it, you risk damaging it just by picking it up. This screen replacement will be nothing like I've done before. I'll start by opening this MacBook Air and working on getting the display assembly removed. There's a total of 10 pentalobe P5 screws to remove before the back panel can unclip. For a laptop without a fan, it still managed to attract some dust, most notably on the battery. The first challenge is the redesigned battery connector. Locked into place with a latch, it's firmly connected. I initially didn't want to pry with a metal tool for fear of slipping and damaging the logic board, but I was left with no other option as plastic tools were not firm enough to bend the metal latch. With that, the connector can be unplugged. Apple's official repair guide requires the removal of the logic board. But why? Let's see how we go without following their instructions. I'll get the 2 antenna cables detached before unfastening the antenna assembly, which will also require the removal of the display controller board. It's connected by a single flex cable to the logic board and secured by 2 screws. With the display's controller out of the way, I can begin prying out the antenna. It's adhered into place, requiring firm pressure to pry free. This may be why the official guide requires the removal of the logic board. However, it is possible to remove without taking out the logic board. All that's left holding the display to the laptop is 6 Torx screws. With the display in a fully open position, they can be unfastened. Now the display can be worked free from the top case. If you had a whole display assembly, you would attach it and reassemble the laptop. It's that easy. But we're going where no Apple repair guide has gone before. From the display's connector, we need to unplug 2 smaller cables. These are responsible for the backlight and webcam, so it's very important that they're not damaged throughout the following procedures. I first tested my methods on an old broken 2015 MacBook display before tackling the Air. The first challenge is to remove the glass cover, which contains the MacBook branding. We need to do this without cracking it or melting the clutch cover or rubber gasket surrounding the display. About 230 degrees was ample, with a quick pass to soften the adhesive. Now that I feel confident, it's time to tackle the Air's display. As I began, I watched almost immediately this cover shrink and deform slightly as it was heated. It appears Apple switched from glass back to plastic for this model. Plastic melts, glass doesn't. The damage is only minor, however I'll purchase another to replace it. I can continue heating and slowly removing the plastic cover. I'm not sure why this cover was glass to begin with on other models, but it's indistinguishable from this plastic one. Now it's over to the heat plate, where I can heat the back of the display to aid the removal of the gasket, which surrounds the LCD. We're aiming to remove this in one piece so that it can be reused. The use of isopropyl alcohol is discouraged, as it can easily seep into the backlight layers, causing issues when we install our new display. It does slightly recess under the display in areas with a few locating tabs. These need to be pried up carefully. There's now 12 screws securing the base of the display and clutch cover that need to be removed before we begin prying up the LCD. The display can now be flipped over to heat the face in an aim to soften the adhesive, securing the LCD to the display housing. I did try to remove this display without causing further damage to see if it was possible. It broke almost instantly. The display is just 0.8mm thick in total, and that includes the plastic layer on top of the glass. Specialized equipment would be required if you were to have any chance of removing one of these panels without damage. Pry tools can only be worked in so far as to not protrude into the viewable area of the panel. Otherwise, the backlight can become damaged by scratches or adhesive becoming lodged in the many layers. To further complicate things, at the top is the camera and light sensor assembly. It's got a cable that runs along the top right-hand side. Care needs to be taken when prying in these areas. Since 2011, many MacBook models have not incorporated the backlight into the LCD, as many who have opened other displays would have expected. The inner workings are just exposed for some reason, most likely done to get the lid of this laptop as thin as possible. Even the smallest piece of dust or a scratch will show up as a shadow when the new display is installed on top. But trying to clean off the shards of glass and old adhesive, it became apparent this was going to be harder than I anticipated, and there was already contamination to the backlight. I did my best to clean it off, but the damage was just greater than I'd first thought. Adhesive had made its way to a lower level. Tweezers couldn't pick it up, so I tried scraping it to the side. It also seems my metal pry tool had slipped in too far and scratched a small section of the plastic backlight. I'll continue removing the glass around the camera before we test fit the new display and see if this backlight is even salvageable. From the old display, we'll need to salvage this metal plate, which is glued to both part of the display's flex cable and the display itself. Because this is the old display, we don't have to worry about causing damage to it, so using isopropyl alcohol here can help. With that piece removed, we can see that this is an LG display. Many of the major parts inside your devices are made by other companies, even competitors, and this is a prime example. Before we can apply the adhesive, the gasket needs to be reinstalled. It just presses into a groove purposely cut for it in the housing. But just when you think we're finally making good progress without any hiccups, the gasket appears to have stretched. I continued working away at it, trying to compress it into the groove. I don't know if it's supposed to be compressed like this, or when I removed it, it stretched, but with some effort, I was able to get it all seated correctly. To affix the new LCD, we'll need some new adhesive. I've also purchased a new bezel to replace the one I melted earlier. Of course, they shipped me 2 left-hand pieces, but it's too late to reorder, so I'm just going to have to make it work. Thankfully, both sides are identical, so I can just flip one of the left-handed versions over to make a right-handed one. The use of proper adhesive here is vital to ensure the display stays in place, but also to prevent any dust from entering the backlight, which could cause artifacts to appear on the display. It's now time to do a test fit to see if this new display actually works and how the backlight has held up. Before plugging it in, I need to protect the flex cables somewhat by installing the metal bracket to the back of the display. They really do expect you to bring absolutely everything to get this display working, backlight and all. I will need to replace some of the old foam adhesive with some new stuff on both sides. The bracket can then be aligned to the display using the tiny plus logos printed to the back of the display. Then the flex cable can be carefully folded over and adhered to the metal bracket, being careful to align it in the correct spot and not to tear any of those flex cables fused to the glass. The backlight might look okay on camera, but it's showing some battle scars. So I want to attach the new screen and test the backlight to see if we also need to repair it. Once positioned, tape can be applied to prevent the display from sliding, which can cause damage to the cables. The 2 backlight cables can be plugged into the new control board before the assembly is loosely attached back into the MacBook Air. Ensuring the body of the laptop isn't resting on the display's cables, I can plug the power cable in. And it's working. A white background will make any issues with the backlight more obvious. The scratch to the backlight is unfortunately visible, along with some other minor imperfections. So it's time to repair the backlight. I ordered a new set of backlight filters for $17 US. Included is 6 sheets of plastic of various texture and gloss. These sheets take the light from the row of LEDs on the bottom edge of the display and evenly disperse it over the whole screen. It's important each sheet is installed in the correct order and orientation to avoid any issues. Each sheet has a protective film on each side to prevent contamination before installation. I first had to find out what order I needed to install them in, as I only need to replace the damaged layers. Removing 2 white stickers on the side of the bezel will allow these sheets to come free. I had damaged and contaminated 3 layers while removing the LCD, so these will be replaced. I'm wearing gloves to prevent contamination of the new sheets from finger oil. I can understand the necessity of a clean room when these displays are manufactured. However, this is hard to recreate at home, so I've just had to do my best. The protective film needs to be removed before the next sheet is installed, with the exception of the last sheet. We'll leave its protective film on until we're ready to install the LCD. With that, the little retention stickers can be reapplied. Assessing the old film, you can better see how they diffuse light. I'll give the LCD another test before gluing it down, as I won't be able to remove it once it's stuck into place. I only get one attempt at this, and I want to make sure the new backlight filters are working as they should. Everything is looking great with the exception of some grime on the protective film. But this just highlights how important keeping dust out is. With that, we're ready to attach the LCD. I'll remove the protective film from all of the adhesive before it's also removed from the last layer of backlight film and the LCD. The LCD can be slid in at the bottom first to allow the metal bracket to fit behind the rubber gasket before I gently lay the display down. Using a spudger, I can push it up to ensure the glass is positioned in the top corners. Pressing it down, it's sealed into place for good. There's no going back now. The backlight cables can be attached and secured with their 2 brackets. For some reason, the metal bracket is sitting proud about 1 millimeter, despite the display's flex cables and metal bracket all being in the correct position. I was still able to install the screws, however, I was careful not to over-tighten them. The adhesive is holding the display in place, so I'm not sure why the screws are necessary. Grounding possibly. Preceding the clutch cover can be installed before the new bezel. The new bezel is made from glass, unlike the original. This won't make any difference to the function of the display. Lining it up with the gasket and bottom of the display, it can be pressed down into place. And just like that, we refurbished the display. That was some serious stuff, all in the name of trying to save some money. At more than $100 less than an assembled screen, is it worth the extra effort? Let's get it attached and find out. Once in position, I'll loosely attach 1 screw on each hinge before closing the display and aligning it with the top case, to ensure that it closes flush before tightening and installing the remaining hinge screws. Proceeding, the antenna can be routed through the display's cables and screwed into place, along with the display's driver board. Then we can go ahead and connect the display's cable and accompanying bracket. With the antennas plugged in, I can dust out the internals before the battery connector is plugged in. This connector got me a second time. It needs to be plugged in by sliding the back in before pressing the front down. Then the latch can be fastened. Attaching the back panel, the 10 pentalobe screws can be reinstalled. Now all that's left to do is remove the plastic protective film from our new display. And we're done. So this is it, an M1 MacBook Air repaired with a new display. But was it worth it? Material cost alone, it's about the same price as one in used condition. So it's not viable if you're looking to make money flipping MacBooks with broken screens. However, if you already own the laptop, it may be a different story. Given the complexity of this repair, the risk and time involved, any DIYer should replace the display as a whole assembly. This is really only an approach for repair shops or someone who is looking to refurbish a number of displays. There is also a risk of receiving a damaged display and not being able to prove that you didn't damage it. These are so fragile, a seller could easily blame you. Functionally though, it was a success. The backlight is perfect and True Tone even works out of the box as the camera flex cable is original to the computer. So we've successfully saved this MacBook Air. And on that note, this has been a Hugh Jeffries video. If you like what you saw, consider subscribing and check out the computer playlist for more videos just like this one. And if you're looking for any used devices, be sure to check out my online store, link for which is down in the description. That's all for this video, and I'll catch you guys next time.